I'm Richard Gearhart, founder of Gearhart Law, an intellectual property law firm specializing in patents, trademarks, and copyrights.
I'm Elizabeth Gearhart, not an attorney, but I work at Gearhart Law doing the marketing, and I have my own startup.
You certainly do. Welcome to Passage to Profit, the road to entrepreneurship, where we talk with entrepreneurs, small businesses, and discuss the intellectual property that helps them flourish. Today, we have Roy Osing, founder of Brilliance for Business and author of Be Different or Be Dead.
I love that title. I can hardly wait to talk to Roy. And then we have Beverly Price with Nastava Jewelry. She also has her own podcast, Her Self-Expression. Very interesting. And then we have Daniel Gartenberg. He's a returnee on the show.
A repeat offender.
A repeat offender. He's going to help us all sleep a little better. I think we all need that. So
sounds great. But before we get to our distinguished guests, we do have IP in the news, which is, of course, always one of my favorite things. Who is on the chopping block today?
Well, this is a patent application. It's not an issued patent, so it still has to make its way through the patent office, but it's General Motors. So if I'm the first one in the car, I get to set the climate. So based on the clothes I'm wearing. So it's
what? No, let me explain. This patent automatically senses the layers of clothing that you have on your body. And
no, the first person in the car.
Well, it can do it for multiple people too.
Oh,
so it senses the layers of clothing that you have and then adjusts the temperature accordingly. So, of course, I agreed to use this as part of our IP in the news because I wanted to ask the question, well, what happens if you're not wearing any clothing? But that said,
have you ever done that?
You don't want to know.
Into the car nude.
That's no. You don't want to know. Anyway,
I don't.
I don't think. Anyway, besides that, though, I mean, it is kind of a unusual invention that they would have sensors all around you and decide whether or not you have.
I don't know. I kind of like it.
Clothes.
I kind of like it. Like if you're driving, you don't want to be fiddling with everything.
I guess that could be the case. But I mean, I thought they already kind of solved that problem with independent air conditioners and independent heaters for each seat. A lot of cars have that, right? So why would you need this?
I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. So I'd like to ask my guests today what you think about this. It's time for Richard's Roundtable. Welcome to the show, Roy. Great to have you with us. What do you think about this idea from General Motors?
First of all, thanks for having me. I'm grateful. I have an expression for gee whiz ideas like this. It's like almost like solutions looking for a problem. And it's not clear to me that I understand the problem or whether the problem's even relevant. I mean, one of the biggest things we need to do is figure out what people care about. So my question is, do people care about that? If they care about it, if it's a big caring, if it's a craving, if it's the desire, then maybe it's got some legs. But on the surface, yeah, I'm not a fan.
I was kind of thinking the same thing. I didn't really put it into words the same way you did. But then there are inventions, things that we didn't think we needed, but now
Facebook.
We need. Like, for example, heated seats. I would have never thought that I would need heated seats, but now that I have them in my car, they're essential, right? So it's sort of a chicken and the egg type of problem, right?
Yeah, it could be. It could be. Initial impressions. Yeah. I mean, for me, I'd be looking for something that's a little more specific to what people actually care about in vehicles. And if you showed me the evidence that shows that 85% of the people really do care about, you know, that sort of sensitivity in terms of their car, then I stand corrected. But on the surface, I wouldn't buy it.
I think I'd prefer it. I can give voice commands to my car. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But if I could give it the voice command, set the temperature to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, then that would be more useful to me.
Well, the other interesting thing about the patent, and I didn't say this earlier, but it's all hooked up to the cloud. So they're anticipating that they're going to have these sensors in your house. And so the car is going to know what you're wearing even before you get to it. which is freaky deaky, right? I mean,
and then it'll be a self-driving car. And so
I'm
it'll decide.
assuming that they think we're all infants, right? We can't even decide how to adjust the temperature in our car. Anyway,
Interesting.
those are my thoughts. Daniel, do you have any thoughts on this?
I mean, as a cognitive psychologist, one of the things that we studied was over automation. And this strikes me as, all of a sudden the car is changing temperature. You didn't mean for it to be doing that. I mean, I wrestle with my Siri all the time. When it thinks, I'm so sorry, I just said that. It might get activated right now. but that's just an example of what can happen here. That being said, playing devil's advocate, I mean, Elon Musk put like a computer in a car. I think it's ridiculous. I mean, I was just in a long car ride with my sister-in-law's kids, and they were doing karaoke in the car and everything. But they justify, paying a lot for this car because it has this computer in the car. So all I'm saying is, who knows what this next generation is going to want when it comes to being spoon-fed exactly the right temperature. Also, as a sleep scientist, temperature really interests me, and I think it's an interesting patent. So I see why they did that, maybe for something off in the future. But personally, as a 35-year-old, it seems a little much to me.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. We're kind of like grumpy old people.
Right.
I didn't have that growing up. What
As a patent attorney, I should welcome every innovation on earth, right? I mean, it's something more to protect. But so anyway, well, thank you for your comments. Beverly, what do you think about all this?
Well, I just want to know how long the training program is to learn how to drive your car with all these gadgets. And what's the size of the new car manual that barely fits in the glove compartment now because it has so many pages?
Yeah, that's it. You know what? They are already really thick, even for the old cars. I have, for my SUV, it's about 3 inches thick. And I think that even makes references to online stuff in the manual. So you're right. I mean, you're going to have a PhD in your car before you can actually drive it one of these days. So I don't know. What's the IP takeaway with all of this, Elizabeth?
Well, I think that I in this one, it's like, I don't know how much market testing they did. It certainly didn't test our age group probably, but if you have a good innovation idea and you have the money, protect it. And maybe you can develop the market yourself, like Daniel was saying, right?
Yeah. I mean, you have to be a big company to do that with a lot of market pull. But it's interesting. You really never know what direction technology is going to go in. And this could turn out to be a great thing. I don't know, but
and you don't know what the newer generations are really going to expect. Like, I think that's part of it too.
Right. I agree.
I mean, our daughter doesn't have a TV. She watches everything on her computer. Like, we live with our TV.
Right. Exactly. So those are great points. I'd like to move now to our guest this evening, Roy Osing, who's the founder of Brilliance for Business, author of Be Different or Be Dead, which sounds pretty dramatic. Roy, what prompted you to title a book that way?
Well, by the way, thanks for having me. I've actually, it's kind of like a theme of 7-book series that I've just completed my latest in, called Audacious Ways I Took a Startup to $1 billion in Sales. And the basic idea behind it is differentiation. My conclusion is, notwithstanding the fact that we have more and more competitors these days and customers are more powerful and fickle, it's my view that businesses overall, and this is a generalization, are not getting any better at declaring their uniqueness in the marketplace. Okay, they're relying on what I call claptrap expressions like better, best, leader, number one, etc., which quite frankly don't mean anything. Okay, so the be different or be dead mantra is all about, if you're not different in a meaningful, compelling way to the people you care about, you're in deep doo-doo. And of course, death is the ultimate extreme and the consequence of not doing a good job of that. And companies die. And my observation has been that a lot of them die because they're simply not capable of differentiating themselves. So that's the nature of the work, trying to help people understand how to do that, how to get beyond that. And there's some cool things that I learned in my career that will help.
Sure. So that's really important. So when you say differentiation, can you explain that in a little bit more detail?
So differentiation is what makes you special. Why should I buy from you as opposed to your competitor? Give me some compelling reason. And it's not because you claim you're the best in customer service, because quite frankly, that's subjective. That's your view of yourself. Okay. What I had to do is figure out how to be really, really granular in defining what makes me special. And I came up with this concept that I created called the only statement. So it doesn't say that we're best or we're better. It says we are the only ones who. Now, only is powerful because it's binary. It either exists or it doesn't, and you can see it, you can measure it. And so you get the kids off the street with the aspirational stuff, and you bring on the only, and it turned out to be a very, very powerful device and tool for stating what makes you special. And look at, there's too many people trying to save the planet and using that as a competitive claim. Well, it's nonsense. But I don't buy from a company because they claim they can save the planet. I understand the aspirational intent, right? And that's important. But you can't put that out to say you should buy from me because, and go up into the clouds and describe that. And so I use terms like businesses are mediocre when they do things like that. And I'm doing that on purpose to kind of push people a little bit, nudge them to that extreme right of the distribution curve where uniqueness is definable. Because today it's cloudy in my view.
So can you give us a few examples of companies that have adopted only statements and what those only statements sound like?
Yeah. Let me just grab. I knew that you did this. So here's one that I use for myself. Okay, because by the way, this can be used as a personal brand and it can be used as a corporate brand. All right. On a personal basis, I'm saying that Roy is the only author, entrepreneur, and executive leader who delivers practical and proven, audacious, unheard of ways, because nobody else is talking about that, to build high-performing businesses and successful careers. Okay, so that clearly identifies and so people will say, well, give me your proof points, Roy. Okay, here are the crazy things I did, blah, 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 and we can talk about those if you want, that led to $1 billion in sales in annual revenue. That's the ultimate proof point. Okay, it's not a feel-good thing. It actually delivers bottom line performance, because my view is it's no sense talking about cool ideas unless you can relate those to bottom line performance. And that was the challenge I had. So I had to come up with things like, right, cut the crap, killing dumb rules, leadership by line of sight, right? Hiring for goosebumps, crazy notions that people thought were ridiculous, except for one thing. Collectively, they drove to $1 billion. So I say, what's your point? Okay, those are ideas that are practical and they lit fires in people and they drove performance. And isn't that what leadership is all about?
Absolutely.
It is. And I do agree with you. It's hard to stand out from the noise right now. And what frustrates me, and I'm trying to address some of this with my website that I'm developing, but is if I type in Roy Osing in Google, I'll get a bunch of different stuff that comes up before your site comes up, just because there's so much advertising and pay-per-click and, premium placement and all this stuff. And so really, how do you stand out? I like the use of these words. So these words have different meanings than what we normally hear in business, right? Like gasp-worthy, create a distinctive, remarkable, unique, and gasp-worthy position in the marketplace. Nobody says that, right?
I know. Isn't that sad?
Well, that is audacious, right?
So,
Absolutely.
So let's stay with that. Okay, look at. I mean, effective leadership isn't about what you know. It's about how you make people feel. Okay, in terms of the journey that you think you need to be on, because at the end of the day, you're not going to achieve diddly squat unless people decide to go with you. Okay, so my bent is always to go to the right side of the brain, go to the passionate, go to the emotional side of the brain. And that kind of degenerates down into the language you use. Gasworthy, we know what that means when we hear the word. It's like, oh my God, we know what that means. And so creating a gasworthy business is all about figuring out what lights fires in people, okay, that gets you to the destination that you want to go to. It's not about promulgating theory, because we don't need any more blue oceans, guys. We don't. We need solid people that could deliver results and execute brilliantly. And that's
right.
gas worthiness.
Just to play devil's advocate here, though, but if I'm a business owner and I start thinking about using the term gas worthy, I'm also concerned that I'm going to be turning a lot of people off because they don't know what that means. And it's not part of the common lexicon, or it's not an ordinary word. Right. And so when I see that, I'm concerned I'm going to lose more business than I'm going to gain.
So you're raising the issue of context, okay? And I'm not suggesting everybody run out and say, hey, we're in the business of creating gas worthiness. I mean, what you need to do is take a step back and do what I call my strategic game planning process, which is really simple. Answer 3 questions, boom, you have it, okay? And within that context, decide on the appropriate language. For some people, it may not be gas worthy. For me, it was, because that was the word that I chose to describe exactly the way I wanted people to feel when they did business with us. I wanted them to go away feeling incredibly good,
right.
Feel good, right? Like nobody cares. Nobody cares about whether they're getting a gig. Okay, everybody sells a gig of internet speed. What differentiates organizations is how people feel when they get the gig. Now, if they don't get the gig, okay, that's another issue, right? But if you got 5 people, 5 organizations delivering a gig worth of internet speed, what differentiates them? Not the technology, right? It's how they feel when they do business with that organization. And we're losing that, guys. And I love the guests. Okay, you guys have got it. I love your stuff. Stay with that. Stay with it. Play to the left, play to the right side. Play to the right side of the hemisphere, because that'll get you loyalty and it'll get you referrals. Right? If you get pedantic and just play to what you produce, you'll be a flogger like everybody else. And that's a tough road to hoe, unless you got economies of scale and scope, which few of us have.
Well, that's interesting. So how does, compared to like the advice you're giving here, is that like a brand promise, or is it something else? It's sort of a brand promise, right?
So people try to translate the only statements into terms that they understand, and I get that. So I've looked at universal sales propositions, and quite frankly, they're just as mediocre as the other competitive claims, because they use those subject words. Brands should definitely be based on what you're unique at. Okay, the question is, how do you create uniqueness? The tool that has worked for me is the only statement. And so, yes, if you have an only statement, like I just gave you, I'm the only one that creates practical and proven audacious ways. You're getting that from me right now, I think. Okay, so right. Yes, absolutely. My brand of audaciousness and edgy stuff and language is all based on that kind of promise that I'm going to be the only one that does that. Now, by the way, my only statement is always a draft. And for those of you listening to this, your only statement and that journey for uniqueness never ends. Okay, because if you think it's permanent, you're actually assuming that the world doesn't change around you. And of course, that's ridiculous. So treat it as a draft, get it in play, experience it, work with it, test it, and evolve it with yourself as you go through life. It will be a brand. And I guarantee you it'll happen overnight, and your competition will go, whoa, okay, what's Beverly doing out there? Wow, that's pretty cool. Maybe we should copy it. And that's another reason why it's a draft, right?
Right. So you took a major data and internet company from infancy to $1 billion in annual sales. So what do you think was your most effective strategy for making that happen? I understand it would probably be your differentiator, but is there anything else?
Yeah. Well, so there's basically 4 pieces that, and I defined these in retrospect. Okay. Because at the time, I didn't have a grand plan articulated as the normal SWOT and all that kind of strategic planning would tell me. I just did stuff that made sense to people. So there's basically 4 planks. And one is this whole conversation we've just been having around being different. Okay, be different. And it doesn't matter what you do in a compelling, relevant way to the target market that you have. So that's a whole piece of work in there. And the only statement is part of it. The second one is, let's get the plan just about right and execute it better than anybody else. Because my belief is heading west is a valid strategic plan. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to execute and learn as we go, and we'll figure out whether it's Vancouver or Seattle we end up in. Okay. But you have really no way of knowing 36 months prior whether that's your destination. It's just too many variables. The third piece is serving. How do you execute? You execute by serving people on the inside, right? Not command and control. There's a whole piece of, some people call it leadership style of servant leadership. I don't think it's a style at all. It's a strategic act. And I call it leadership by serving around. And there's a whole piece in that. And the last piece is do it yourself. I believe in micromanaging certain things that should never, ever, ever be delegated by a leader. And those are the things that relate to what? Executing your plan. Because at the end of the day, this body of work, this mantra of mine is all about how do I deliver amazing growth? The $1 billion in sales, we had no idea what it was going to be. What we knew was it was amazing opportunity in the data and internet space. And we had to figure out a way how to uncover it. And so every year we set ridiculous goals. By the way, I'm a fan of ridiculous. Not knowing perspiration is a source of creativity and innovation. If you know how to do something, you have no motivation to do anything different, and you have no motivation to innovate, right? So we didn't know, and we just kept driving. But those 4 sort of principles: be different, execute, serve your people, and do it yourself as a leader when you have to put your fingerprints, personal fingerprints on the organization. Those were the key elements that actually, I think in the end, explained why we got to where we got to. I still get goosebumps when I think of the $1 billion, you know, I still get it. I got them right now. Goosey.
Thanks, Roy. We have to take a commercial break right now, and we'll be right back after this. You're listening to Passage to Profit with Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart.
Welcome back, listeners, to Passage to Profit, Road to Entrepreneurship with Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart. And our special guest today, Roy Osing, founder of Brilliance for Business, author of Be Different or Be Dead.
It sounds like a threat.
Now I understand why I've lived.
And Roy seems like a pretty tough guy.
Now I understand why I've lived so long. People have been telling me I'm different my whole life. But anyway,
the secret to longevity.
But one thing I think is important for any entrepreneur in business. So you have a personal brand, whether you try to develop a personal brand or not. Like, people look at you and they see you and they experience you, and that's your brand, whatever you're projecting. So, Roy, how do we build a remarkable personal brand? Because that's really what we want, right?
Yeah, and you know, it's a challenge. But the interesting thing to me was I started out with this whole Be Different methodology and tool set. Okay, in an organizational sense. And then I realized that it had just as much, if not more, application on a personal basis, whether it be your career or whether it be your life. I mean, I'm still using this with my grandchildren, by the way. I'm a Be Different papa, and boom, there's a whole story behind that. But in terms of the brand, what I find is people generally don't do the work in terms of what they want to be. Okay, and what you want to be is kind of like a strategic question, right? Which is about what's your strategy in your career? What's your strategy in your life? You have to do that first and then build literally a personal only statement within that. And that's what you express. It's not what you feel that you are, it's what you have to be to satisfy your goals. Okay. And so that's the piece that tends not to be done because it's extremely difficult to do, and it's excruciating, and pain is the strategic concept behind that. I mean, you go through all this agonizing work to do it, and you try it and try it and try it. But over time, it will evolve, and you just have to keep going at it.
So who do you think has a really great personal brand?
Lady Gaga.
Yeah. Yeah. And what
she did not build that. That was not accidental. That wasn't a function of her singing capability. Her singing capability is her core service, without which she doesn't have the capability to develop a brand. But she's done things with social media, okay, in terms of communications. She's done things in terms of loyalty creation with her little monsters that nobody's done. Okay, she's way ahead of the pack. By the way, you're not old enough, or maybe you are. Anybody here remember the Grateful Dead?
Of
Oh,
course, yeah.
Okay. So
Well,
there's
I did
another.
age myself there. Sorry. All those listeners who think I'm a spry 35-year-old are now disappointed. But
Well, there's
anyway,
a-
please continue.
Oh, I'm just saying there's another example of an amazing journey that a guy called Jerry Garcia took, who is unfortunately no longer with us, but he's one of the lead guitar players. He came up with a statement about the Grateful Dead, great business organization. It was, you don't want merely to be the best of the best. You want to be the only ones who do what you do. And I never discovered this until way after I was working with Only. And I thought, Jerry, what a genius. Think of the brand that they had. They built stadiums to allow people to record their own music at a time when patents, right, and copyrights was going crazy. They said, hey, before social media, we need to figure out a way to share our stuff. And they did a remarkable thing. So I would say Gaga is amazing. The Grateful Dead, the most successful touring band in history, would be my second choice.
Wow.
Well,
So what are the steps though to building the personal brand? So we recognize Lady Gaga and the Grateful Dead as being awesome, different, unique, only. But what are the steps to do that? How do you create that?
Yeah, what you don't see is the work she put in behind it. It's called a career plan or a game plan. Okay, that is very, very simple. We don't have a whole lot of time to go through it, but it's literally creating the answers to three questions. One is, how big do I want to be? That's a statement of growth. Okay, in an organizational sense, it may be top line revenue. In a personal sense, it may be a career target objective. That's how big. The second question is, who do you want to serve? And that's ask a question, where am I going to get, in the case of an organization, the revenue? In the case of personal experience, who do I need to influence to get to the career goal that I want, or the job that I want? And the third piece is, how am I going to compete and win? Okay, that's a statement of, how am I going to beat the others that are out there coveting the same thing as me? And when you put those together, the answers to those three questions together, you basically have, in a personal sense, a game plan for your career or your life. The brand is a function of that. You don't start out building a brand, guys. You don't. You start out doing the work to figure out what you want to be when you grow up, and who do you have to influence to get there. The brand exudes from that with good hard work.
Yeah, well, that sounds fascinating.
And I think Lady Gaga fits with you, because I did think that her just calling herself Lady Gaga was kind of audacious, right? But it's stuck, and she has a lot of fans. And you're right, there are a lot of really good singers out there. And I mean, anyway, so she really differentiated, right?
Yeah, I mean, look at the Kardashians, who, if you're listening, I think are mediocre when it comes to talent, but they're really great at marketing and creating this celebrity stuff, where they have a reality show that's just about their lives, right? And that's their talent, is creating a brand.
So what I'm hearing from you, Roy, and I think this is your strength, is you can basically take any idea or any business, almost, not every single one, but almost any idea or any business, and with the right marketing and positioning, you can make it a success. Do you agree with that?
No. What I would say is, wow, I shouldn't say it's a qualified yes. So what I would say is, one of the biggest mistakes entrepreneurs make is they don't deal with the how am I different question before they start spending money. Okay. It's like, why would you burn cash when you're not unique? And I deal with startup CEOs all the time, and it's the biggest thing. And I say, stop. We need to do the work. We need to do the strategic game planning work before you start running with that cool technology. You know, in a way, that's kind of where I was coming at in my response to the GM idea. I don't understand the context. I don't understand that it's the most important thing to do. I don't understand that technology should be chased as opposed to any other technology. So that's the tough work. And so if people do that work, I think there's a great chance that they won't fall victim to the mortality statistics of startups. They just won't. And I've worked with some startups that are very successful. I'm not saying just because of the work, but a big part of it was because of that work that they put in. I mean, I had a CEO that built things to go into manhole covers, right, that prevented used syringes from being shoved down into manholes only to infect telephone company workers when they went down in the manhole. Terrible situation. Yeah. But she wanted to do, yeah, it's horrible. And in fact, the reasons that she did this, her husband was a outside foreman, and he went down and he got stuck. So she came to me and for a business strategy. So we created this strategy. The problem was she wanted to chase every manhole in the world. Right. So I convinced her that focus is really important. So once we had the strategy, it was built around, well, all right, where do we focus? And then we launched that way with a brand, with her only statement. And hey, man, she's been so successful, and she's been written up in compensation kind of magazines, a safety award she's won. And she's just brilliant. I love her.
Yeah, I know when Richard started Gearhart Law, he spent a lot of time trying to figure out how he was going to differentiate his firm. Now, granted, there were only 35,000 patent professionals in the whole country when he started, and a lot of those were at firms and big companies and stuff. So he didn't have a super lot of competition. But there were still other patent firms in New Jersey that we were competing against. So how do you compete against that? So he came up with, I think, some differentiators.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we did was we departed from the stogial law firm websites where you see a bunch of headshots, and kind of put a little bit more of a retail spin on the website and made it inviting and attractive to potential clients, especially those who had maybe negative experiences with attorneys. We wanted to ensure that our clients understood that we were approachable human beings, and that we would, take their projects seriously. I mean, a lot of new companies, inventors are often insecure about their ideas, and sometimes we'd hear about the idea before they tell their spouse, and so people needed to feel like that we would handle those things appropriately. So
well, take the entrepreneurs seriously. So if somebody showed up and said, like, I'm on a tight budget, can you help me, even though you're a law firm and I know your prices are probably astronomical? We're like, no, our prices are not astronomical. And yes, we will help you,
right,
and take you seriously.
and we will, not looking down at people from Mount Olympus, which, so it was, so that was part of it. A part of it is the radio show. I mean, I think we're the only intellectual property law firm that has a radio show.
And everybody thought we were crazy to do it.
And
No.
everybody thought we were crazy to do it. So
just a couple comments. First of all, you use the word only, and you need to use the word only.
Mhm.
I don't want to see you're the best podcast show or the best IP lawyer out there. You're the only one who does what you do. Stay with that. And by the way, the other thing, which I really agree with, you hit on, is you use the word experience. I mean, that's the other piece, right? For entrepreneurs, it's not just about what you produce. It's how people feel while they are getting it. And so the experience angle that you took, I think, is brilliant. Good for you.
Oh,
Absolutely
well,
important.
thank you. I mean, it's worked so far. And even though the firm has grown significantly from our early days, we maintain that attitude, and we ensure that every employee, has that feeling.
Yeah. So if an entrepreneur is struggling with these questions, should they hire a coach? Obviously they should read your book. Do you work with entrepreneurs to help them kind of try to define these things?
Oh, yeah. I think the first place is just familiarize yourself with the content. I mean, I've been writing about my stuff since 2009. If you go to my website, bedifferentorbedead.com, I mean, I've tried to put as much resource material in there to help people. And there's a ton of work on game planning, a ton of work, articles on the only statement. So hopefully that's helpful. But at the end of the day, I'm happy to connect with people. I mean, I have people sending me emails on their draft only statement, which, by the way, I want you to do, because you use the word only. You're to email me your only, and we'll have a conversation about it. We talk about that all the time. So I'm trying to knock these down one at a time, right? But yeah, at the end of the day, if somebody wanted to do a workshop to create a strategic game plan, I do that in 2 days, and they have something they can execute on the third. It's shrink wrapped. I know how to do this. And no business is not applicable. Every business is applicable to this process, which is the beauty of it.
And I think it's super important to get some what do you want to call it? Non-subjective outside counsel on what you're doing, because you may think you have the greatest things in sliced bread, like GM with their climate control, and somebody else may go, meh.
No, another set of eyes is always really, really important. And that's the other part that helped me in my career is I never relied on just myself. I always relied on people's advice. And I found mentors, though, very special mentors, not people that knew. Here's the difference, right? Roy's mentors didn't necessarily have 17 letters behind their name. What they had is they were MBAs, Masters in Business Achievement. That's what they were. They were people that got stuff done in the trenches with the politics and the dirtiness and the messiness of executing strategy. Those were my mentors. And so you need that help. And I'm one of those guys. I'm a dirty player here. I'm a dirty player.
Well, we do. We do want to play dirty.
Well,
we have to take a break. But
yeah.
when our next two presenters come back, tell them a little dirty secret they can use.
Roy Osing, everybody, and author of Be Different or Be Dead. Roy, where can people find you?
Yeah, just go to my website, bedifferentorbedead.com, and there's resources there that I think that will be useful. All my books are there. And you can reach out to me at gmail.com. I'd be happy to connect with anybody who wants to talk about this stuff.
Sounds great. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back, everybody. It's Passage to Profit. We're just having a grand old time here today with Roy Osing, author of Be Different or Be Dead. I'm assuming that he's talking in the business context there, but speaking of being different, could you give us a little update on Fireside?
Absolutely. So for those of you who don't know, I have a startup called Fireside Directory. It's a video directory of small businesses, and it's been evolving over the past couple of years while I've had it. It is the only, Roy, the only small business directory on video that does what my directory does. And there's a whole lot to it that's kind of secret unless you sign up for it. And then you understand why it is such a great marketing tool. So I don't know if it's going to stay named Fireside because the trademark office is giving me a hard time on that. So I've been looking for other names, and I just would, in searching for other names, you know, I've been doing marketing for a long time. Gearhart Law was easy because he had to name his law firm after himself. That was the New Jersey regulation. But when it comes to naming your company, there are people that will help you do that. And I actually talked to somebody who bought a URL from someone that owned it because it was the perfect name for their company. So the first thing is to buy the URL as soon as you see it. Otherwise, a troll will buy it and sell it back to you. But maybe you can't get it, but maybe you can buy it from someone else. But it has to be easy to say, easy to spell, easy to remember. So Be Different or Be Dead. I love that. Like, that is, everybody can spell those words. Everybody can remember those words and say those words, right? And so for me, I mean, I could try to do an acronym maybe, but I've kind of been struggling with what the name should be if I can't use Fireside Directory. And I am part of a peer advisory board. So we get together once a month and we talk about our companies and we talk about the struggles we're going through and we give each other advice. So Roy, do you have any advice you can give me right now? Anything dirty I can use?
Sure. No, I don't have the solution. And my normal response to this is I don't have a clue. And the reason for when I say that is like, I don't understand the context.
Right.
Names, nomenclature, branding has got to be built within a strategic context. That's my whole point. We need to do the work. What's the strategy? The actual name and all of those tactics will flow from that. I'm not a fan of leading with tactics because you can satisfy anything if you're tactically driven. And I'm not saying you are, okay? But I'm just saying I need to be really careful. It's like people always ask me, what do you think about my social media campaign? And I say, I don't have an opinion. If you want me to comment on the discipline, okay, of posting in SEO, that's one thing. But if you're looking for effectiveness, I want to understand what your strategy is. Then I'll give you a comment. And so I would just say, take a step back, take a deep breath, sort that piece out, and then start looking for options that make sense in that context. Does that make sense for you?
Well, absolutely. So I had asked Kenya Gibson, who's normally here, for help with this because she's a creative genius. We're actually meeting on Friday. And she said, list out everything that your company's about and that it does, and everything that makes it special, and just everything you can think of. And then we'll go from there. So
So the only thing I would say is, this isn't about throwing 1,000 things at the wall, right? And trying to make sense of those things. That's not what this is about. It's about the only work. It's about the one thing, that one silver bullet that makes you special and stand out. Use that and milk it. Milk it in everything. What you say, the website, I mean, everything should be driven from that. I'm not a fan of to-do lists. I'm not a fan of multitasking. I'm not a fan of multitudes, because quite frankly, it's like mass marketing. It doesn't exist. Mass markets don't exist because they presume everybody's the same. And we all know they're not. So that's what I would say. Just take a step back. All right. And figure that out. Send me an email. I can help.
okay, good. Thanks, Roy. So Richard has given me the twirly finger, meaning that it's time to move on. So
Carefully, the hidden twirly finger.
Hidden twirly finger. So I would like to introduce Beverly Price now with Nastava Jewelry and also her podcast, Her Self-Expression. So Beverly, we are really interested to hear your story and what you're doing with your jewelry and your podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate it, Elizabeth.
So give us a couple minutes on what you're doing.
Okay. Well, I am the only jewelry designer that creates bold statement jewelry pieces in one-of-a-kind handcrafted designs and also custom work. So you can go to a lot of jewelry designers, but you'll never find any design like mine. It's big, it's bold, it makes a statement that helps women on their journey from self-expression to beauty. My podcast, Her Self-Expression, became a natural extension of that, where it's dedicated to aiding women on their journey from self-expression to self-empowerment. And what's unique about it is it's looking at the inside and outside of a woman. Many podcasts look at different elements of a woman's development, but I combine both the inside and outside development for a unique approach to holistic empowerment. Okay.
So I do think it's super important that we work on our inner selves, but I do think it's super important that we know what our outer selves look like to the world too. And it sounds to me that's like what you're doing, the whole thing, right?
Exactly. That it takes both to make a whole.
So what is that? What is involved in that transition? You said going from, the internal to the external makes it sound like there's a journey there. So what is that?
It's very much a journey.
So what is that journey about? Can you?
Well, in my case, a very personal journey. I started as a corporate executive that everybody thought was the most talented together woman in the world, but deep down inside, I lacked self-esteem, lacked self-confidence, and was afraid that people would find out that I was weak. And so what I had to do was go on a journey to get to know myself and develop myself on the inside, so that my self-esteem rose, so that my self-empowerment rose, so that I could get to the place that I could be strong and grow. At the same time, I needed to work on my outside, because if I look better on the outside, it helps me feel better on the inside. In addition to helping my personal brand, people get to know me for who I am. So I'm going to work inside out on things like confidence and self-esteem and recovering from trauma and things like that. And I'm going to work on the outside with things like body image and fashion and makeup and things like that, so that both pieces come together to fill that hole. If you think about COVID and you think about what happened during COVID, how many people actually dressed up during COVID? Nobody. Everybody was in their sweatpants all day. And for a woman that will then dress up, put on some makeup, you just feel better. So that's the outside. For a woman that knows she lacks esteem, does the work with a coach, she will feel better. And that creates empowerment.
So I did want to ask the question though. So tell us about your personal journey inside, and what were some milestones along the way, and what were some of the steps you took to reach the spot that you're at now?
Sure. Well, I think the original steps in my journey were growing up in a home that gave me everything material that I wanted, but didn't do anything to instill self-esteem or self-confidence. It was one of those environments where you're never quite good enough. You didn't get the best A+ on the grade and whatever. So when you start with that foundation and you grow into adulthood, you start to have a very weak foundation, if you will, to yourself. And so some of the things I had to do were take a look at myself and get really honest about where I was. Instead of hiding myself from the world, afraid that I would be found out that I was a woman who lacked self-esteem, I had to face my fear, whether it was through working with a coach, whether it was therapy, whether it was journaling. There's a whole multitude of things you can do to actually deal with a woman that has low self-esteem and self-confidence.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting that, because it's sort of like, on the one hand, you had tangible career successes that you
Yes.
could point to. And for myself, I mean, I've faced a lot of the same challenges that you have in terms of self-esteem and confidence, but it does seem for me that actually having something work out right, getting it right in the workplace increased my confidence, at least there. Did you get any benefit from those successes? Did that help your self-esteem?
Well, I think what happened for me was I was incredibly successful professionally, but I was not successful at all personally. I could have done a better job at being a mother, and I certainly didn't have a lot of success in romantic relationships.
I see.
And so I became fragmented, if you will.
Mhm.
And then there's the point in time where, when the job was no longer there, that facade began to crack, and I could feel the self-esteem and lack of self-confidence in every area of my life. So
I
you
see.
pull away the thing that's going well and everything else crumbles.
Wow, that is really profound. And I do think all of us need to do inner work on ourselves, no matter who we are.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask Roy any comments or questions.
I think the description of the story is amazing. I love the language, and it's so intimate and it's so honest. And you had a strategy. You had a very specific strategy that you were unfolding through your life to exploit the things that you weren't happy with and take advantage of the things that you wanted to. And good for you. And I think that whatever enterprise or anything that you decide to do, you're going to crush it. Good for you. And I love your
thank
website,
you.
by the way. And you used only statement. I want to see your only too. I want to see that, because I looked at your website and that was your only, but you didn't say it. You need to say
I
it.
will.
So,
I
So
will.
so just to go
Note
back
to
to
self, revive website. Revive website.
So just to go back, so it's interesting because it's almost like you're implicitly recommending sort of a diversified approach to life, and
Mhm.
making sure that all parts of us you have a plan B, right, for everything, right? And sometimes the job stuff is going great. Sometimes the personal stuff can go great, but it's always in flux, right? And
Right.
I really like your message and the fact that you're drawing attention to these things, because I think it's too easy to get caught up in one or the other, the personal and the business. So
Right. But you've been through it yourself, and now you're coaching other women and trying to help them find this balance of really what defines you and what's the most important to you, right?
Yep.
Because I mean, if you lose your job and that's all you are, and the only way you define yourself, you have nothing left, right? And so, and I think that a lot of people get stuck in that their job, like, Roy was talking about the personal brand and the work brand kind of overlapping. Well, what if your personal brand and work brand are the same thing? Then when life gets tough in one area, you really need help, right? So
Yeah.
what do you tell the women that come to you when they come to you for help?
Well, I first get them to define who they are. most women, and there's some studies that are just horrific. For example, a study done by Dove Soap concluded that less than 3% of women consider themselves beautiful. And we know beauty isn't just the outside, but that's less than 3% of women. And 60% of women wish they respected themselves more. So the first part of what I do is get to know that woman and help that woman get to know herself, to see if she's hiding and to see what she wants to be. So you start with the end in mind. If this is what I want to be, what are all the steps I need to take to get there? Do I not like myself? Do I need to reinvent myself? Are there pieces of my life that are causing me harm and holding me back? What changes need to be made to get me there? I think are the most important things to work with a woman on. But until you get to the core of what a woman thinks about herself and how she feels, which is the foundation of the work, you're never going to get anywhere with any realistic permanent change.
Right. Do you think that applies to men as well?
Well, I'm not a man, so I couldn't say that. I would default to Richard on that, but I just seem to notice that at least more women are open about their self-esteem problems than I think men are.
Yeah.
What do you think, Richard?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if I have a great answer because I'm not every man. So I can't, you know,
You are the only one like
I'm
you.
the only man like me.
That's the truth.
So, I mean, I faced some childhood trauma when I was very young. I was adopted. And so I got separated from my mother at an early age. So I don't, you know, I kind of struggled with that for a while. And it's not a common experience. So I kind of hesitate to generalize. I mean, I think, you know, all people are insecure to some degree. And I think all people cover their traumas and to some degree. And I think that's the same whether you're a man or a woman. I think men are probably more reluctant to admit it because if you're out in the world, you know, doing what you're doing, that, or anybody out in the world doing what they're doing, you want to be confident. You want people to have confidence in what you're doing and what you're saying. So you kind of tend to gloss over the flaws or present things in a way that in the most positive way possible, right? So I think it's there. I think there's, you know, but I just, you know,
It's different.
it's maybe expressed differently,
So,
or maybe it's just tolerated because that's what men are expected to not be, you know, influenced by that kind of stuff. And so you
right.
just push it down,
So,
maybe.
so we have time for probably one more question for
Right.
Beverly. So I'd like to give that to Roy. Roy, do you have another question or a comment?
Yeah, I think the one thing that you've really hit on is this whole, and I'll tag it feelings, because I think the feeling piece in organizations and business generally is missing. I mean, certainly in terms of my experience, I mean, to the point, I mean, men aren't very good at that, quite frankly. And so why would I put a man in a customer service manager's position dealing with experiences that I'm trying to create to be memorable with customers? And so that bent, and what I had to do is revector the whole recruitment strategy in the business to get people that actually cared about humans, because there's a lot of people that don't care about humans and they should be in the back taking inventory, and yet we put them in front of our frontline people. So you're hitting on a subject that I think is exceedingly important, and you're expressing it in a way that's very, very personal. But if you expand that to business generally, we need to be more concerned about how people feel about what they do, because that's what people buy on. Okay, this is a strategic thing. It's not just a cool idea, right? And so thank you for raising that. That will be extremely important and for you. And I just hope other people listen and say, yeah, there's something about being a nice person that should be a characteristic of leadership. And yet I've never read it expressed that way. There's a whole lot of other things that people talk about leaders. How about being nice? How about having feelings and empathy and so forth? So thank you for that.
Yeah,
That's
that
great.
was excellent. That was a great insight, Roy. So unfortunately, we've come to the end of Beverly's segment. I found this extremely important and interesting, but how can people find you, Beverly?
Yes, they can find me at www.her-self-expression.com, or my jewelry line is nastavajewelry.com. You can find me on social media. The podcast is on Apple Podcast and Spotify, and you can find me on YouTube.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you. So now we are on to our final presenter, last but not least, Daniel Gartenberg. So this is near and dear to my heart too. How do I finally get a good night's sleep? So Daniel's trying to help us all with that. So
after you solved your emotional issues and figured out your only statement, you deserve some rest. And so Daniel is going to help us.
Yes, Daniel with SleepSpace.
Yeah, he's going to help us get a good night's rest after we solve these issues. So please.
I'll try my best.
Give us your 2 minutes. Tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, so I am the only sleep scientist who is going beyond sleep tracking and actually showing that we can improve every human's sleep on the planet. And so that's been my goal for 15 years. And we've got some large grant awards from the NIH and the National Science Foundation to actually prove that we can use sound, light, vibration, and eventually temperature to help every human sleep deeper.
Great.
Excuse me.
Well, I definitely want to sleep deeper. I think that's why everybody's so grumpy all the time, because nobody gets a good night's sleep, right?
No, there's a lot of evidence, and we can all personally relate to that. There's some good science showing that people have a worse sense of humor when they're sleep deprived, partly because sleep is essential.
It. Okay, now I understand. What had I been doing wrong all these years?
So you have a smart bed platform. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So we recently rebranded as SleepSpace, and it's a piece of software. And I also invented this nifty little piece of hardware that turns your phone into a smart bed. So we'll integrate with any wearable. I'm wearing a couple of my wearables right now, or a ring. This other one I'm testing out, a circular Apple Watch.
So they're rings on your
Whoop.
fingers, right? Like
Yeah, these
like
are
rings.
trackers actually, and I've tried every gizmo. So we'll integrate with most of those, except for not Fitbit right now. And that gives us really good measures of your sleep. And it's essential for sleep staging, basically, to get cardiovascular data. But, you know, a lot of sleep coaches and cognitive behavioral therapists really care about how, when you're in bed asleep, is sort of the most important variable. So we invented this mechanism that slides under your bed, and it sort of puts your phone in its place at night. It can block out EMFs and stuff too. And we pick up on the micro motions through the mattress to measure your sleep. So the phone is actually the sensor. And the important thing about this is it allows us to more directly deliver audio stimulation throughout the night that's designed to enhance your sleep. So one of the algorithms that we have currently implemented is we'll actually measure your sleep stage every 30 seconds and in real time play this pink noise dynamic mask that blocks out noise pollution and works effectively by ramping up the sound slightly when you're asleep in order to more effectively block out that noise pollution. And we have lots of other tech like that.
So does it have the same sensors that the GM car patent does and sense the number of layers of clothing that you're wearing?
I'm going to contact GM after this. No, but in all honesty, temperature is a huge factor when it comes to sleep quality.
Yes.
And we're constantly exploring collaborations with how to manipulate temperature, because we have all these algorithms on figuring out your sleep in real time, and I have an IP portfolio around this, and then doing something based on detecting which stage of sleep you're on. And it could be relevant to things like tinnitus. We have our deep sleep stimulation thing, even things like PTSD to sort of enhance people's dreams in this crazy sort of inception world. Because, you know, I see our current problem as dealing with so much information that is blasted at us at all times. And sleep is how we actually make sense of the information that we get throughout the day. It's how we process our realities. And what's going to need to happen soon is we're going to have to take more control around processing our realities when companies like GM are making all these automations to create our realities for us, basically. And so that's a future that I plan to be a part of.
Well, I have very vivid dreams. Like I definitely live out a lot of stuff in my dreams. I would like to kind of turn that off sometimes. I don't know. Can you invent something to do that?
So yeah, I mean, this is a little further down the line, but we're going to apply for some grants soon around doing something called, one of the main treatments if someone has vivid dreams is you do something called dream completion. So if you have maybe a traumatic dream that you experience all the time, which is often what happens when you have PTSD, one of the most effective treatments is you go to a therapist who's trained in this, and they will come up with a creative change in the typical outcome of your dream. And you'll focus on that better, happier version of your dream. And our technology can basically implant that happier interpretation of your dream through the science of playing sounds at certain times. And this is what our sleep valence patent is. And so we would replay the sounds that you were exposing yourself to in your therapy session while you're having the dream to prime the different interpretation of your dream. And that's sort of the mad science side of things.
So that does sound pretty
Sounds
weird.
like a science fiction book.
Yeah. So I wear my Garmin watch, and it has an app associated with it. And every morning one of the first things I do is I look at my phone, because the app records my sleep and my sleep patterns. And I'm just kind of wondering how accurate this is. So for example, yesterday or last night, I slept for 7 hours and 7 minutes. I spent 36 minutes in deep sleep, and 4 hours and 53 minutes in, I don't know what it is.
Light.
Yeah,
light sleep,
get the
and then an
idea.
hour and 30 minutes in REM sleep, right? So, is there a sense from you about how accurate this is and what these patterns mean? It seems like it's different every night, and I'm fascinated by it, but I can't interpret it. So,
all right. So I'm going to try to be as succinct as possible. And you're really touching on a lot of important things that we're wrestling with in sleep science right now. There's actually first off, SleepSpace, our software, will integrate with Garmin on iPhone, not Android for some reason. But we'll pull in your Garmin data and give our own AI analysis of your sleep. If you were to download the SleepSpace app. And if you go to sleepspace.com/union, you can get a 30-day free trial for that, just to plug that for a second. But to answer your question, we're really wrestling this in sleep science. And there's a new term for sort of what you're dealing with, which is orthosomnia, which is basically that the information from these devices can be opaque, unclear. We don't know what they mean.
Right.
And it actually gives you more anxiety. And this is particularly problematic for someone who's actually, it doesn't sound like you're facing a real sleep problem. That's like a healthy amount of sleep, maybe a little on the lower side, but it sounds like your sleep efficiency was probably pretty good.
Well, this is one of the better nights I've had in a long time.
Night?
Yeah.
So yeah, that sounds like a reasonably good night. For your age, and it changes with age, which is partly what makes it hard to interpret this. I would say that that's a reasonably good deep sleep, maybe a little low on deep sleep, but I would be pretty happy if I were you with a reading like that.
Great. I'd be interested in the AI piece, but I want, before we run out of time, I want to give Roy a chance to comment or ask a question. So Roy, what do you think?
So I think it's an amazing idea. The only question I have is, can you correlate the number of glasses of wine you can have before you go to sleep to make sure that you have an optimum sleep pattern? Just,
Well, we all
Me
know.
too. I want to know that too.
Well,
just
so
kidding.
alcohol will destroy your sleep,
Yeah.
as we all can personally relate
Yeah.
to. Even, I can see differences in even imbibing in, one is usually, I'm not like really strict on it, but you do much more than one, you're going to probably pay for it. But that's a big part of the future of medicine that I see, which is this personal journey around improving your sleep. And since we integrate with all of the devices, we can provide that personalization to be able to figure out, change this thing, get the blackout blinds, get the happy lamp, walk outside. And, there's all the typical things. And usually there's one or two things that are very specific to one person that are the things that would most affect their sleep quality. And so if we're the tracker, we can help surface those things for people.
Yeah, I
Well,
think for me, it's temperature. I'm sorry, Roy, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say more on a more serious note. I'm intrigued about the answer to the question. How big do you see your market?
Yeah, I mean, so in these grants, we have to justify all this, and you could say it's $1 trillion market. The market of improving people. Is shaking your head over here.
Well, I'm shaking my head because you don't get to $1 trillion without having some pretty specific sort of things. So really what I'm asking you is, rather than trying to solve the problem of every manhole, to use my example before, every manhole in the world, where are you going to start? Where's the biggest opportunity? Who are the prime customer segments that you think would say, yeah, I want this? Well, just help me understand.
Yeah. So, we have 3,000 paying subscribers right now to our system. And there's other competitors in this space, like Sleep Cycle, Sleep Score, that, are making around $20 million a year. But what we see the future as is sort of a more medical play. So we're currently running a clinical trial. And there's this great McKinsey report about how buying decisions are made in the sleep space. And it's something like 70% of buying decisions are made by health practitioners. So we've been working with cognitive behavioral therapists trained in administering insomnia. And we're actually going to show, hopefully, by the end of this clinical trial, that when these therapists use our system, they can get better outcomes than their conventional therapy. And so this is assisted cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, and it can eventually replace the clinician to some degree. And there's like $100 million companies like Pear Therapeutics and Sleepio, which have that model. But we actually think that people heal people. And while we'll have some replacement of humans, we're mainly trying to augment these clinicians and coaches' practice. And so
Wait, Daniel, do you think that you'll be able to get the insurance companies to cover this eventually?
That's the plan, is getting, you can get covered through insurance by new remote patient monitoring codes and stuff like this. So I'm still trying to thread that needle.
Yeah,
that's great. If insurance pays for it, it's even better.
Yeah.
We have to jump off now for another commercial. We'll be right back with more Passage to Profit right after this.
How can people find you, Daniel?
Dr. Snooze, Dr. Period Snooze is my Instagram handle. And SleepSpace.com, you have all the information about me there.
Great. Thank you.
We'll be back with more Passage to Profit right after this.
Welcome back, listeners, to Passage to Profit, Road to Entrepreneurship with Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart, and our special guest, Roy Osing, who has really zeroed in on some incredible marketing techniques and just life techniques too. And we've also had a couple of incredible presenters. Now we are to the kind of fun part of the show where we ask the pointed question.
I had fun before.
Well, I did too, but we asked the pointed question, and I came up with this question. I think it's a good one. So I'm going to start with Beverly. So Beverly, what annoying quality of yours has actually helped you in business?
Well, I would say that I'm obsessively creative. And it started when I was a child and had to continually rearrange the furniture in my bedroom. And it has continued as an adult to having to rearrange furniture, but also to start companies, to come up with new marketing strategies, and to come up with new designs for my jewelry business. But I can't stand still. And I am totally obsessed with creating new and different things.
That's amazing. So do you have a lot of rooms in your house? Do you have like different places to rearrange all the time, or
Yes, I do.
It's just one room that you constantly rearrange? How does that work?
Well, and then on top of it, we just moved to the beach and I sold all my old furniture and bought new furniture so I could rearrange all over again.
That's good. Okay, Roy, what's your one annoying quality that's actually helped you in business?
Yeah, this is a very sensitive one. I have my whole life been a pusher, and I'm impatient. I'm a kind of person that I don't want to talk about it. I want to get on with it and do it. And that really worked for me. I'm pretty sure I got it from my mom. In thinking about it, I got that piece from her. My dad was kind of laid back, and so I definitely got that from my mom. And it's had two effects. First of all, in terms of my business career and so forth, it's turned out, I think, to be one of the reasons I was able to do what I have to do. It's an interesting, though, when you do the flip on that with my personal life, I'm married to a dreamer.
Oh,
she dreams about stuff. And of course, what I do with that immediately, I take the dream and I want to execute.
right.
Well, sometimes it doesn't work out that well, but overall, I think it's a good annoyance.
Yeah. Okay, Daniel, you're on the hot seat.
Yeah, so I guess my problem can be I can overly micromanage people because I only trust myself to solve the problem. So it's almost a trust issue, and I think maybe it's similar to I think a lot of entrepreneurs can relate to that. So I'm always struggling with trusting people to do what I want, but I think you need a certain amount of aggressiveness to solve problems to be successful. And honestly, just a lot of people lack that. I think it's a skill that is really pretty rare. This is coming from someone that got a PhD in cognitive psychology and did a lot of cognitive assessments on people. And that's probably why I don't trust people.
Well, I feel like this is an interview question for a job, sort of like, well, what is one of your weaknesses? Well, I work too much, so
Okay, so which one of your annoying qualities
I should
has helped
probably
you in
let you
business?
describe those.
No,
I would
I wanna hear
probably
from
say,
you.
I'm going to say, well, like everyone said, every annoying quality has its pluses and its minuses. I would say one of my things is just tenacity. It's like if I'm working on a legal argument, I spend enormous amount of time thinking through all the different possibilities, thinking what, either opposing counsel or the patent office, whoever I'm sort of up against, all of their possible defenses. And on the one hand, it's good because that I try to have a response to every counter argument, every argument they might make. But it takes a long time. And sometimes I can get bogged down in these things. And my colleagues will just say, Richard, come on, we got to get moving, because
it's not just that. He walks around the house talking to people I've never met.
I'm having my own
He's
private staff
constantly
meetings.
talking
What
around-
that says I'm not talking to
And
myself.
I'm like, who are you
I'm
talking to? He's like
having-
opposing
Those
counsel.
are virtual
That's
staff
annoying.
meetings.
That's annoying to hear you
Oh,
talking
okay,
to.
so we agree on something. Okay, that's fine.
So I know what my most annoying thing is. In fact, we had somebody on the show a while ago who actually confirmed it for me. I ask way too many questions. And she said, like, she was talking about different types. And she's like, yeah, Elizabeth, you came out as the inquisitor. And she's like, those people drive me crazy in a meeting. It's like,
Well,
yeah, I
okay.
do.
Since it's all out on the table now, I have to agree with you because it's like I get off a phone conversation. She says, "Did you ask him this? Did you ask him that? Did you ask him this? Did you ask him that?" And she's unhappy because I never get the full story.
But yes, so many people find that annoying. But the business I created is all about asking people questions and digging in. And many times when I interview small business owners about their businesses for Fireside Directory, I managed to pull stuff out of them that they didn't even know they knew or that was good about their business, right?
And you're interviewing people now. So you're doing what you love.
I'm doing what I love. So yes, I asking questions can drive other people crazy, but it helps me a lot in business. So.
No, hang on a sec. I got to speak in favor, okay, of Elizabeth. Okay, everybody learns differently, because I'm also married to one of those people. And the way she learns,
one of those people.
She learns by asking questions. Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where the rest of us kind of like, oh well, we're at the 50,000 foot level, and that's all we want to know. Well, she can go deep, and so can you. So stay with that. And by the way, the other thing is, right, in business, you've got it. How on earth can you figure out what somebody craves if you don't ask them questions and learn that? So good for you. I'm 100% behind you. Don't you ever be normal.
Oh no, I've never been accused of that.
No, I think
Thank you, Roy.
a very low likelihood of that happening. All right, so we need to wrap things up.
Okay, so I'm going to go through everybody's website one more time. So our guest is Roy Osing, founder of Brilliance for Business, author of Be Different or Be Dead. And you can find him at www.bedifferentorbedead.com.
Definitely check it out, because it really provides a different perspective on business and marketing, and it's one worth having. So,
and then we had Beverly Price, who presented a couple of things. Her Nastava jewelry, Nastava jewelry.com is where you can find that. And it's very unique, one of a kind, only kind. Yeah. Only of its kind. She also has a podcast and coaching business called Her Self-Expression, and you can find it at her-self-expression.com.
Yeah, helping people on their own journey while acknowledging hers. So,
and then we had our PhD sleep specialist, Daniel Gartenberg, with SleepSpace.com.
And he will never put you to sleep.
No, his goal is to put you to sleep, but he is using incredible brand new technology to help people sleep better, really pushing the envelope on this. It's like science fiction type of stuff. So sleepspace.com. And that was pretty much it.
I think it was a great show. I really had a great time, and I really enjoyed our guests. Unfortunately, we need to sign off for this week, but we return to the station next week with another episode of Passage to Profit. Before we go, I'd like to thank the Passage to Profit team, Noah Fleischman, our producer, Alicia Morrissey, our program director, and Mark Wilson, our syndication manager. Our podcast can be found tomorrow anywhere you find your podcast. So just look for the Passage to Profit show, and don't forget to like us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And remember, while the information provided during this program is believed to be correct, never take a legal step without checking with your legal professional. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you next week.